everybody. Mike Dyer from the WCPO High School Insider podcast. It is Wednesday afternoon here at WCPO, and I'm pleased to be hosting a very special episode of the WCPO High School Insider podcast, the 2002 Roger Bacon boys basketball state champion team. If you haven't checked out our three-part series on WCPO, definitely want to take an opportunity to do that. Part 3 airs tonight during the 6 p.m. newscast, taking a look at the legacy of the Spartans state championship team over, obviously, LeBron James and Akron St. Vincent-St. Mary almost 18 years ago. It's not an anniversary story per se. Somebody had asked me that this week. I said it's just a fantastic story. Everybody knows about the Chosen Ones book that was written by Tony Mealy, but I'm pleased to have 3 of those 2002 Roger Bacon basketball players here with us on the WCPO High School Insider podcast. Tim McCoy, the head baseball coach there at Roger Bacon, a guard on that team. Tim, thanks for coming in the studio. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
And we also have Beckham Wyrick on Skype from his home in Fairhope, Alabama. Beckham, how are you?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
And Dave Johnson, the starting point guard on that 2002 team, joining us as well. And Dave, thanks for taking a few minutes, especially signing up for Skype there at the last minute there. How's your week going?
It's going well. It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Great, guys. Hey, and as I told you before we got on the air here, less of me, more of you. I want to be a fly on the wall in this discussion and roll the proverbial basketball out on the court and let you guys share your memories. But as always, you can find this WCPO High School Insider podcast on Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. And as I mentioned, taking a look back at this special legacy, and you can see the highlights that our producer Brian East pulled yesterday of the 2002 state final. 18,375 were there at the Value City Arena. And Tim, I'll start with you since you're here in studio. I bet over the years, we've had discussions as I've interviewed you over the past month or so, and you're so gracious with your time and effort and helping me find photos and track down people. But 18,375 in that arena. I bet there's been, maybe 30 or 40,000 people that swear that they were there at that arena in Columbus that day. I mean, what are some of the things that you've heard over the years from people who talk about watching you guys on the court that day?
Yeah, it's pretty funny you said that. Before I came in today, I got a haircut, and I told the lady that I was that was cutting my hair that I was heading down here, and she was like, "Oh yeah, for what?" And so I told her about the podcast, and she was like, "Oh, you were on the Roger Bacon team? Oh, I was at that game." So she told me that right away. She said her brother graduated from Bacon in '96, and so you hit the nail on the head right there with that. But over the course of the years, it comes up more often for me with like what I'm doing at my work or in my job. It's always like a solid icebreaker to throw out there that, I played against LeBron or in anything that we're doing new. But yeah, I mean, it's still fresh on a lot of people's minds, specifically at Roger Bacon.
Beckham, every March 23rd, is it one of those things where it's almost, without the gifts, of course, but is it almost a Christmas-like, birthday-like time to remember that game and maybe text your buddies about that?
Yeah, it's fun going back and reliving those memories. Tim, Nate, and Matt and myself stay in pretty good contact to this day, have a ongoing text message chain. So it's been fun, especially, with the SAG a month ago and this coming up. We've been in touch a lot, going back and just rehashing memories from that time. And really, anytime LeBron is getting ready to do something great or does something great, it always brings up questions from people and always brings those memories. So, lucky for us, LeBron ended up being one of the greatest of all time. If he would have, ended up being a dud in the NBA, the legacy probably wouldn't be as strong as it is now. So we have him to thank for that a little bit too. But we enjoy it.
Dave, I got to ask the starting point guard on the Roger Bacon team. When someone brings up that season and particularly that game, what are the first thoughts that come to your mind?
It's a good question. The first thought I have is just, the pride and the thankfulness to be a part of that team and that game. The pride that I think it's brought the Roger Bacon community. It was just an awesome experience. And I think Tim and Beckham would agree. We're just super grateful to be a part of it. We earned it. We worked our butts off ever since we got to Roger Bacon, and we were rewarded with a state championship against LeBron James of all people. So pretty awesome.
And Dave, I want to piggyback on that a little bit. Talking to Dave Bidwell, a longtime assistant coach there at Roger Bacon, and used this quote in the story earlier this week on WCPO.com. He says, there's almost memories weekly, if not daily, about the game. I'm just curious, how does it impact you to this day?
It is. It is almost weekly, daily. Especially this time of year with high school basketball and the Ohio State tournament underway now. This time of year probably more than the rest of the year, but it comes up pretty often. In my case, my kids are getting a little bit older now. I've got a daughter who's 6 and a son who's 4, and they see LeBron on TV and they know the whole story. So, I talk to them about it and they ask questions, and to relive that kind of through them has been pretty special too.
Tim, I go back to you, and you mentioned your son, Parker, who has the LeBron jersey and the poster hanging on his bedroom wall. How surreal is it to say, 18 years later, as you mentioned, LeBron and Beckham, you've mentioned how proud you are of what he's been doing in the NBA. But, did you ever imagine, even, 8 to 10 years ago, that we'd still be talking about how LeBron is climbing the ranks in the NBA record books, and lo and behold, your guys' children are watching him still on TV.
Yeah, I think at the time we knew it was something special, but with the lack of social media at that time, then it was just kind of the Sports Illustrated thing came out. We knew that was a big deal, but I think if social media back then was as big as it is now, then I can't even imagine what this story would be like. Thinking about how far that's come and how far LeBron's come over the last 10 years or so. He just seems like he's getting better and better, and it makes this story better and better. Speaking of Dave talking about his kids seeing that, like I mentioned before, Parker, he's got a LeBron jersey that he reps around the neighborhood, and it's funny listening to little kids come into his buddies come into our house to say things like man, did you see LeBron last night, or whatever they're doing, watching TV, and that's the first thing that comes up always is, oh, my dad beat LeBron. And I almost have to defend myself a little bit and be like, yeah, I did actually, man. So.
One thing that, and I didn't get this from many of the players, but Tom Thompson told me, and you probably saw the clip there in part 1 of the series, but the Sports Illustrated cover, how you guys apparently used it as a dartboard at one point. And I'm going to throw this out there. Who remembers that, and what can you tell me about when that magazine first came out?
I remember it pretty well. It was actually, we remember when the magazine came out and he was on the cover, and we definitely used that as bulletin board material. But to reference the dartboard, we had a team dinner at my house, my parents' house, and we were down in the basement, all hanging out, eating dinner, and that's when somebody took the cover, ripped off the front page, stuck it on the dartboard, and people were throwing darts at it. So that is an accurate story.
How much did Beckham? I'll go back to that game against St. Vincent-St. Mary in December of 2001 at Kent State. How much did that game, you guys lost by 9, I believe, 79-70. How much did that really prepare you for what happened 3 months later?
I think it helped us a lot, just because there was so much hype around him specifically, but their team as well. At that point, I guess we were the only Ohio team that they ever lost to, but they were just so good. So we knew that we were pretty good. We didn't really know what to expect going into the game. But I remember for me personally, we lost by 9, played them close, ended up losing by 9. The score was a little wider than the game was actually, throughout the course of it. But I remember the atmosphere in the locker room was kind of like more positive than it otherwise was for losses, just because we knew that there was a good chance that we were going to see them again. And it just gave us the confidence to know, like, hey, we can play with these guys. So going into that game in March, up in Columbus, having already had seen them and having already had played them well, we came into the game with a different kind of confidence. And that helped us.
Did Coach Brewer and maybe the assistants, Tim, did they kind of treat this like, hey, we're better than those guys, we're equal to them? Or, because I think a lot of people on the outside would say, and John Popovich kind of referenced this, like, people thought this is little Roger Bacon beating Akron St. Vincent-St. Mary, almost a Hoosiers type of theme to it, and nothing could be further from the truth because you guys have been battle-tested through the GCL and so on and so on. So I'm curious, what was the coaching staff, what was their message in preparing you guys for that moment in Columbus?
Well, from what I recall, and these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Coach Brewer made us feel like we were the worst team in Cincinnati most of the time. It didn't matter who we were playing. We weren't good enough to be on the court with those other teams. Going back to the time when we first played them, I agree with Beckham 100%. When we went into the locker room after the game, it was almost, I don't want to say like we were celebrating, but it was like, that hype's diminished now. We've already seen it, and we're gonna see them again. But going into Columbus, from what I recall, it was still the same approach. Nothing changed. Maybe a little bit right before the game, like, hey, this, you're however many minutes away from a state championship. But before that, it was, I think our walkthroughs were just as hard as the first day of practice right before that game. So.
And to jump in and piggyback a little bit on what Tim's saying, I remember after we won the regional finals against Baden, maybe the coaches were just a little bit weary of us having a letdown, thinking about facing ASVSM in the finals. But they hyped Columbus Beechcroft, who we played in the semifinals of the state tournament. They had us worried as if they were going to be, the best team out there, from my personal recollection. And then obviously that game, we won that pretty handily, but I think that was just the way the coaches were. Like Tim said, there was never a worry that we were going to be too overconfident. The coaches made sure of that. So going into that game, in March against Akron, we were prepared and fully confident that we were on par with them as a team. And
I don't recall who the Beechcroft player was, but Brian Neal referenced the same thing, Dave, saying that there was a player on their team that was a standout, and Coach Brewer made it out to be that he was the greatest player whoever lived. Do you recall?
I remember that just because I ended up having to guard him some. Mike Brown.
Brown.
I think he was averaging like 20 points a game that season, and we ended up doing a pretty good job on him. I think he had like 2 or 4 points, and that game ended up being pretty lopsided.
Now, were you guys the first semifinal, or was did St. Beat play before you guys?
I think we were the first. I think we stuck around and didn't we watch them a little bit afterwards? I think
we were the early game. Yeah. I can't remember who they played in the semifinals. I think we were the early game, and then got a shower and watched a little bit of their game before heading back to the hotel.
How many morning games did you guys play that season? Do you remember? Do you remember any game as early as that 11 a.m. tip?
I think maybe in Delaware we played. The first time we played St. Vincent-St. Mary up, I think we came back. We were home for like a day or two, and then we left on Christmas morning to go to Delaware to play and slam dunk to the beach. And I remember we played some early games there, but there was a bunch of guys in that tournament we were in. It was an invitational for some of the top teams in the country. I think J.J. Reddick was there, Nate Robinson was there.
Akron, St. V's was there. Those guys
St. Vincent-St. Mary was there. Oak Hill Academy was there.
That was a really good tournament. That was another. The GCL is a good league, so we're always going to be tested there. But to be able to that ASVSM game in December, and then that tournament up in Delaware, I think our coaches knew what we had and really wanted to test us against some elite caliber competition, and those types of games, playing against that type of talent, I think really, let us measure ourselves against some of the top players in the country. Really, talking about being up in Delaware, and just gave us that confidence to know that we could play with anybody.
So assistant coach Bobby Holt said something telling, I think, when I was over at Peggy Brewer's house for this interview, and he said that there was a switch, I guess, on who guarded Drew Joyce from the regular season game. And Dave, you're shaking on your head, so I want you to elaborate about that. But he made a switch on that for the state title game?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as you guys were talking. The first time we played St. Vincent in December, not only did we, gain the confidence that we knew we could compete with them and eventually beat them, but I think we got a lot of strategic, game decisions, game changes that we could make leading up to the finals, and I think one of the big ones was switching to have Frank Phillips, who was much taller and had really long arms, start out on Drew Joyce, because in that first game, I don't remember the box score exactly, but I think we let Joyce get loose a little bit, and he was able to knock down some threes. And we were able to adjust from that going into the finals by putting Frank on him, and really limited the impact that he had on the game.
What do you remember about watching film on these guys, or just the scouting report in general going into the game?
I don't think we watched film on them, did we?
I don't remember a whole lot of film. I think, Tim, you said it a minute ago, we didn't really do a whole lot of special things. We played them pretty much straight up like we did everybody else that year. Obviously, we threw a lot of different bodies at LeBron when guys got in foul trouble, and kind of rotated between Beckham, Frank, Monty, Josh probably a little bit. But there wasn't a whole lot of double teaming. We didn't play zone. We played straight up man-to-man, solid defense, just tough, physical. We gave them everything we had.
Beckham, was it one of those things, and I'm going to talk about the forearm shiver here in a second, but was it one of those things where you knew, LeBron ended up with 32 in the game, but do you remember the coaches saying, not that they would say this to you guys probably straight up, that he was going to get his, but as players, did you know, okay, he's going to get what he's going to get on the offensive end, but we just got to contain everybody else?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. You broke up.
I'm sorry.
There for
I was just going to say,
a little bit of the question.
LeBron had 32 points in that game, and yeah. I don't know if you remember. I was just curious if the coaches ever said something to the effect of, we know LeBron is going to have his highlight reel plays and all that sort of thing from an offensive output, but it's a matter of containing the other guys. Go ahead.
I do remember Coach Brewer asking me, because I was matched up on him to begin the game, and asking me in the days leading up to the game, kind of, well, how are you going to guard him? What are you going to do? And it's like, I'm just going to guard him like I guard everybody else, I guess. That did stick with me, and I can't remember what he responded, but you can't really do anything. You can only do what you can do against a guy like LeBron. And so I knew that he had 32 the first game, he had 32 the second game. What I tried to do with him, and obviously it didn't work. He had 32 on an individual matchup level, but I just tried to make everything as difficult as could be for him during that game, and just kind of being physical, jawing a little bit, just trying to make him uncomfortable as possible, just to where he could not get in like a rhythm in a comfort zone. And like I said, he did score 32, but I think that may have had some impact in some way.
Tim's description of the guarantee was just awesome. And if you haven't seen it, go back in part one and watch that again. But Dave, I'm just curious from your standpoint. And Peggy Brewer told me, because I mentioned to Peggy, or I asked Peggy and some of the assistant coaches, now with social media, something like a guarantee in a state final will go crazy, obviously, on social media. But Peggy remembers even that I guess Coach Brewer brought in the newspaper from that morning, whether it would be the Columbus Dispatch or whoever it was at the time, saying, LeBron guaranteed the victory. I'm just curious, what do you remember about the guarantee itself?
Well, I definitely remember the guarantee. I don't know if I necessarily remember Coach Brewer walking in with the paper, but the guarantee was, again, kind of like the cover of Sports Illustrated. It was bulletin board material that helped fuel our work ethic and continue to show practice every single day and get better. And the guarantee. You're right. If they had social media today, that would have been really blown out of proportion. But even back, it was a big thing, and it was all over the news and stuff. So. Yeah,
we could talk 3 hours about the game play by play, but obviously I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go straight ahead to the forearm shiver, Beckham. You told me something very interesting because, reading a lot of the old newspaper clippings and just, hearing the stories and going back and reading Tony's book again. But really, you've never found any footage of the forearm shiver in terms of the full snapshot of what happened that first time down the court. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was. I don't think that it was caught on the O&M broadcast. There's another video of it floating around out there somewhere of the game where it's actually the radio broadcast, but there's a video feed with it. And on that one, you can kind of see the tail end of LeBron kind of falling back a little bit. But like I was telling you before we got on the air, I'm almost a little bit glad that it didn't get caught. That way the urban legend surrounding the forearm shiver can continue to exist. If people saw it, it would probably lose some of its luster. And just I've told plenty of people this over the years, but it wasn't really like I don't want to say it was malicious. It was premeditated in the fact that I wanted him to know, like, hey, like I said earlier, I'm going to be here all day, and this is kind of what you can expect from me all day. I don't think that he was necessarily expecting that impact. I think I caught him off guard a little bit, which maybe made it look a little more, a little more vicious than it really was, I guess.
Do you remember him saying anything on the court to you? Any of you guys?
Not really.
Yeah. To your bench or anything? No.
I don't remember him doing a whole lot of talking. I wasn't matched up with him a whole lot, and I'm a foot shorter than him. So, Beckham, you probably know more than anybody, but I really don't remember him, talking trash or, talking to us, maybe more talking and yelling at his own teammates because things weren't going the way they wanted, but not necessarily directed at us.
How much, a lot of people up north, I'm an Akron native, so I remember the game and the feeling of what it was like knowing that,
question, Mike, is who were you cheering for?
Well, I didn't want to cheer for anybody. I was in college at the time, but I was actually working for the part-time for the newspaper up there, and just remember the shock that, St. V actually got beat. But obviously, knowing the full story now, it shouldn't have been as much of a shock as it was. But I'm just curious, LeBron comes over at the end and congratulates you guys, and what did that? Nate Wyrick mentioned, how that still resonates with him today. What did that mean to you all these years later? Just that he would have that sixth sense, as it were, just to come over and say, "Hey, great game, guys," even though obviously he guaranteed a state championship for anybody.
I think it's I'm looking back. If I put myself in those shoes back to where we were then, I probably was like, I don't care that you're over here, Right. But now, I saw a clip of it on ESPN not too long ago. They were showing something, and he came over and we froze it. I think my wife froze it, and I took a picture of it on my phone because I was like, look, my hands are like touching LeBron's hand now, so like the difference between what it was then and now is, that's all due to LeBron James.
I had Josh Hosfeld and Brian Neal on the podcast a couple of years ago, and Josh, told me it was just almost, the game itself was almost like a blur. It went so fast. Going back at it, and Beckham, you're kind of nodding there. I'm just curious, when you go back and watch the game, you said you have a chance to do it maybe a couple times a year, but does it seem just a far away, distant memory for you, or how do you kind of reconcile everything now, 18 years later?
For me, it's fun to go back and watch. It's hard to answer specific questions about what was said on the court or how I felt back then, just because it was so long ago. And I played a lot of basketball between then and now. But going back and watching the game, it kind of puts you right back there. And when you're watching like the film, like I said, every now and again I pull it out and watch it. You think little small things come back to you about like, man, this is the way that I was feeling when that shot went down, or when, you know, you were chest to chest talking smack, you know, and just, I think with time, as Tim was saying, like you just get a little bit of perspective and you know, stuff my dad always used to say, you're shocking the world, you know, and you just don't, as a high schooler and as a kid, you don't really think about it. You know, you're just kind of playing basketball and doing what you got to do that day. But when you get time to reflect and to look back, and how many people, you know, you made proud, and what that meant to the community of St. Bernard and the whole Roger Bacon High School community, it is really, you know, a special thing, and you realize how rare things like that are when you get time to look back on it and kind of let time pass.
Dave, when's the last time you watched the game?
I get it out a couple times a year as well. It's probably been 6 or 8 months since I watched it. But I, like Beckham said, I can't remember all the little nuances of the day and, you know, things that were said, but I can remember most of the plays of each possession of that game and kind of how it flowed. And it's a lot of fun to put it on and to reminisce. And, you know, it was a good basketball game too. I mean, if for anybody who hasn't seen it, that enjoys basketball, it was a good game. It's just a lot of good players, obviously, and it was a well-played basketball game that was competitive and very entertaining.
I've talked to Beckham and Tim at length about Coach Brewer. I wanted to ask you, Dave, just looking back at it now, obviously, you know, his coaching style, and Beckham referred to this before. You know, he's learned to appreciate what Coach Brewer did for the team. I'm just curious, from your standpoint, how did his coaching style resonate with you years later, even, you know, 5 to 10 years after the game?
Yeah, I would agree with probably everybody on the team. You know, as we look back at it now, and you know, with Coach Brewer not around, you know, it's obviously extremely sad. We all wish that he was here and that we still had a relationship with him as adults, and you know, being older. You know, at the time it was tough. He was not easy on everybody, and you hated it at the time and you didn't understand why at the time, but you know, being 35 and looking back now, I completely understand it. He got results, and he pushed us to our limits to work as hard as we could and do the best that we could. And you know, those are lessons that I'll keep with me for the rest of my life and with my kids. And you know, if I ever get, you know, coach basketball, those are things that I'll remember. So, how
ultra competitive were you guys? Because Tim, you're telling me a story about you and Beckham, and I like to hear that.
He loves to tell that story.
I'll tell you, yeah. I think I fought everybody that year, at least at some point in the season during practices. I was telling Mike Beckham about one time at practice when whenever we would practice, sometimes I would get put in a spot where you're like, okay, you know, it was either me or Nate Wyrick or somebody, whoever we kind of mimicked our game, mimicked the team we were playing. You're this team's best player or whatever, so just get up shots. So, I mean, even if you got a shot up in the air, it could have gone over the backboard. It didn't matter. The starters had to run. So I think one time, I forget who I was being, but I don't know if I caught fire or if I was just getting shots up or whatever it was, but Beckham and I got into it pretty good. Remember, I think he set us. I went to set a screen, he ran through me, or he was setting a screen and I ran through him, and then he just wouldn't let it go. He followed me around the damn court the whole time, and that was one of many. I think Dave and I got into it a few times as well, but our practices were brutal. We used to do was it 5-on-5-on-5 winner stay or whatever, 4-on-4-on-4 winner stay, and we'd have practices where there would be no shooting whatsoever. It would just be if the offense got 4 passes off, then the defense ran, and if the defense stopped, the offense ran, and there was no fouls. Oof. So there was some brutal brutal moments that season.
Give me your best story, Beckham.
Oh, there's a bunch. I don't know if I could pick one out right now, but there were some intense moments. To Tim's point, Tim probably did get in a fight with everybody on the team at some during our junior or senior year. But you got a disciplinarian coach. You've got a gym full of guys. Half the team was football players, ultra competitive guys. So it got chippy, it got scrappy, but it worked for us, because we brought that same grit to the game, and that same confidence that we kind of built, competing with the guys on our team who were some of the best. We had a great team, so you're playing against, you're matched up with great players every day. So that translated well into Friday nights.
I'll throw this out to everyone here. It's just kind of a final question. What do you savor the most from that season?
Obviously, I'll answer first, just because that way I can say something and don't have to worry about what's already been said. But obviously, we had success, which is great. But I think just kind of the bonds that you build with your guys, with your teammates, while you're going through the grind of the season, is what I enjoyed. Getting to go through the ups and the downs of a season with, not a guy that you got stuck on a college team with that you're going to spend a few years with and you'll part ways, or a guy for me, like on a pro team overseas where you're on the team for a year or two, but playing and going through it with some of the people that you grew up with, that have been your friends for your whole life and are going to be your friends for your whole life. That's what was special to me, is just strengthening those bonds that were already strong to begin with.
Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with Beckham. The relationships that we made, both with the players and the coaching staff. It's hard not having Coach Brew and Coach Corcoran around to share in these memories. They were, a huge part of the story, and we're still close with, their wives and their families. But the relationships that we've all, developed through the years. We don't all see each other that often anymore. Beckham's in Alabama. A lot of the other guys live in other states. So, it just makes it that much more special when we do get a chance to get together. And it almost feels like we haven't missed a beat. We get back together and, we're telling stories and joking and laughing, and it doesn't matter if I haven't seen you in a year. It still feels like, we got to get ready and go to practice the next day or something,
Tim, you've been baseball coach there at Roger Bacon 14 years now. You have a unique perspective of staying within the school, and you're telling me about how, freshmen every year hear about how you played against LeBron, and kids used to do book reports on Tony Mealy's book and stuff like that. But when it's all said and done, what do you savor the most when you hear these stories? The state championship ring only comes out in special moments. It's safely hidden away, as we all know. Each one of you guys said the same thing. But what is it that really kind of brings you back to that moment in time?
Well, I think these guys touched on it really well. It's the relationships that were built, through that time. We're linked together forever, and a lot of us, if you look over the longevity of all this, we all played against each other growing up or played with each other. There was 4 guys from St. Bart's. There was a couple guys from St. Clement's. We played against Dave and Monty with the Royals. They were like our biggest rivals growing up. And then we all get together and it was almost like, it was like the perfect recipe, the perfect storm coming together for what was going to happen. When I think back on it, like these guys saying, we start talking about stories and being able to tell stories. It's evident when we all get together at the Stag every year or whatever. It's pride in Roger Bacon. It's pride in what we did. And I've just like yesterday, I got a text message from Frank Phillips. I can't say it on the air what he wrote me, but it was pretty funny. Some inside joke that we used to say to each other all the time, and that was a group of characters put together that are linked together forever, including the coaching staff. I mean, when I saw the thing last night on the news of Coach Thompson talking, I just started cracking up laughing about it, because he's just got such a unique personality, and that was across the board. I mean, the dancing before games in the locker rooms and everything else. I mean, we had some tense moments on the court, but soon as the game ended or the practices ended or whatever it was, we were one of the tightest groups around. And I mean, it's kind of what I try and build my baseball teams on. When I'm coaching, I want guys to be that close. I want them to have that kind of experience with each other, because it's something that they'll never forget, and I certainly haven't.
Great stuff, guys. I want to thank Tim McCoy, Beckham Wyrick, Dave Johnson, all members of the famous 2002 Roger Bacon State basketball championship team. And be sure to check out part 3 of our special 3-part series on WCPO tonight during the 6 p.m. newscast. And you can see all 3 episodes. We'll have those on WCPO.com along with this podcast later in the week as well. So want to thank you guys for your time. And we will talk to you next week here on the WCPO High School Insider podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.